Hello, and thank you for choosing Danomics. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how we can customize our decline curve analysis chart, how we can manually set the decline parameters on a well, and how we can generate a multi-well type curve. Let's get started. I've selected a well from my map, and now I want to customize how this chart looks. There are a number of options that I have available to me. When you come over here to the right-hand side, you should see the chart options. If you do not see these, click on the gear icon in the top right-hand side of this window to expand them out. Okay, once you have this view, some of the changes you can make include the following. You can choose to add additional fluids, such as water. You can choose to put your data on a log scale. You can choose to stagger the scales on your data by clicking Stagger Fluids. And you can choose whether or not to look at the data in extended time, which covers the entire range of our forecast, or in a shortened, truncated forecast view that allows you to focus more on the data of interest. If you want to zoom in on either the time or the rate axis, you can left click and drag, and to zoom to full extents, you can double click on that axis. Okay, now that we've done this, let's say we want to modify our declines. How can we go about doing this? There are a few different options. First, we can left click and drag the start date of our decline. So in this case, I'm going to drag it out to this second peak. I can do the same for my gas as well. Or if I want my declines to start at the same period, I can hold down the Shift key and double click on my start date, and that will set both the fluids at the same start date. Okay, now let's say I want to change my decline parameters. For example, let's say I wanted to set the B factor to 1 for both my oil and gas phases. To do this, I simply come in and in my oil column and gas column, I set my B factor row to a value of 1. You'll notice that as I do this, both the QI and DI parameters are automatically updated to maintain the goodness of fit. Okay, once I have done this, I may want to look at my decline in other views. For example, I may want to look at this in a cum time view, or I may want to look at both a rate time and a cum time view simultaneously. Once we have chosen this layout, if I click to other wells, it remembers my layout selection. And I can always change back by choosing which chart I would like to view and what fluids I would like to see displayed on that chart. Okay, so now that we have done that, let's look at how we can create a multi-well type curve. First, I will come here and I will click on the Type Curve tab. And now, what I will need to do is I will need to create a new type curve. To do so, I'm going to click on New, and I'm going to give it a name. In this case, I'm going to choose Niobrara P50. Okay, now that I've done that, I also need to choose my well data set. To do so, I come down here to the Data Options, and I'm going to select a well set. I've not yet created one, so I need to do that by clicking the plus sign. Okay, I'm going to name this well set Niobrara. I'm going to add a filter, and let's say I want to filter by my spud date, my formation, and my cumulative oil production. So I'll start with cumulative oil, and I'll say cumulative oil production should be greater than, let's say, 5,000 barrels. I want my formation to be set to Niobrara, and I want my spud date to be after 2015. Once I've done this, I'm filtered down to a smaller subset of wells. I can then highlight these wells, send them to my well filter by clicking on the right arrow, and hit OK. Once I've done this, you'll see that it populates an aggregate view. Okay, now that I've done this, I can choose whether or not I want to normalize my data by things like the maximum rate, the cumulative production, or the lateral length of my well. And I can choose how I would like to aggregate that. Do I want to look at, for an example, an average or a certain percentile? In this case, I'm going to look at the P50. Okay, so once I've done that, I can now, once again, put my data on log scale. I can choose to stagger my fluids if I would like, and I can show the individual curves. Okay, so first I'm going to set the decline parameters for my oil. Here I have the option to grab my data points and manually drag them to where I would like in order to fit the decline as I see fit. Once I've done this, I may want to look at additional things such as my well count to understand when the number of wells begins to drop off. In this case, after around 4 to 5 years. If I want to now make a decline curve for my gas, I simply click here and say add fluid, select gas, and hit add. And then I can repeat the process of dragging and dropping my decline curve to get the match that I would like. Okay, now I have a decline curve that matches the P50 for my oil and gas. Let's say I wanted to make a higher view. So I could, for example, say Niobrara high. And I'm going to choose the same well set that we used before. I'm going to set this, let's say, at a percentile, and I'll set it at the 90th percentile. Okay, now that we have done that, we can come through, and we see that it's drawn us our new aggregated curve here, and I can repeat the process of dragging and dropping until I get the match that I want. I'm focused here on matching my first few years of production when I have the highest well count. Once again, to do this for gas, I can simply say add a fluid, click add, and then repeat the process of matching the decline on this well. All right, so now that we've done that, we have our decline curves. Now, how do we apply these? So let's come here to a well that has a shorter production history. So here we have some wells that didn't start production until later in our dataset's history. In this case, I'm looking at the Jumbo Fed 3571-3-27. Now, if I want to apply the type curve that I made to guide the production here, I can simply come over here to my oil column, and I can select my Niobrara P50 and my Niobrara P50 for the gas, and we see that it has updated the forecast for these wells. And if I wish to see the economics, we see that they are now being driven by the type curves for this well. Okay, so that is it for this module. If you remember, what we showed you how to do was how to come in and manually manually forecast out your wells by typing in parameters and by changing the start date through drag and drop. We then created a multi-well type curve where we created the type curve, created the well set, and then determined if we want to look at, for example, the P50 or the P90 in our example cases. And then we applied those type curves to an individual forecast to guide the production. Okay, in our next video, we will cover how to export some of your data. Thank you.